You guys do the reading?
Yep.
Randy, did you?
Again.
I did the Isaiah last night. That was, and then also Ezekiel 38. It's tougher for me. I just took one pass at it.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we're going to get to that probably next week. I don't see us hitting it yet this week, but that's really good. I mean, if you guys are that far ahead, then we should be able to breeze through this a lot more quickly. So we, on this timeline thing, we have Isaiah 17 through 19, and there's more out of Isaiah. What you want to do is, like, I think they're mostly in Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah. You have these burden of the nation type prophecies, right? Where he goes through lists of nations and says, here's how it's going down. And you want to kind of differentiate between, is this something ancient or is this something that might have a future application to it? So I'm not going to exhaust all that, but as we get to the end of this study, what you guys want to do is probably set yourself to go through the prophets in a year and just start marking things and just kind of just start slapping them in your own timeline to just go, oh, this is kind of talking about this. Because that's really what I did to come up with this. It's just like, you read them enough and enough and enough. And it's like, okay, that has to be before this or after that, and then eventually you come up with a timeline. But there's so much more because he's so thorough, man. But we're going to start with Isaiah 17. And the reason I'm going to start here is because I don't exactly know when this occurs. This is either within the Ezekiel 38 war, or this is what causes the Ezekiel 38 war to blow up. But the end result of it is almost the exact same as the Ezekiel 38 war. So I'll get into that point when we get there. But does one of you guys want to pick that up and just read the whole thing?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Isaiah chapter 17, the burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. The cities of Aroer are forsaken. They shall be for flocks, which shall lie down, and none shall make them afraid. The fortress also shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Syria. They shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith the Lord of hosts. And in that day it shall come to pass that the glory of Jacob shall be made thin, and the fatness of his flesh shall wax lean. And it shall be as when the harvestman gathereth the corn and reapeth the ears with his arms. And it shall be as he that gathereth ears in the valley of Rephaim. Yet gleaning grapes shall be left in it as the shaking of an olive tree, 2 or 3 berries in the top of the uppermost bough, 4 or 5 in the utmost fruitful branches thereof, saith the Lord God of Israel. At that day shall a man look to his maker, and his eyes shall have respect to the Holy One of Israel. And he shall not look to the altars, the work of his hands, neither shall respect that which his fingers have made, either the groves or the images. In that day shall his strong cities be as a forsaken bow, and an uppermost branch which they left because of the children of Israel. And there shall be desolation, because thou hast forgotten the God of thy salvation, and hast not been mindful of the rock of thy strength. Therefore shalt thou plant pleasant plants, and shalt set it with strange lips. In the day shalt thou make thy plant to grow, and in the morning shalt thou make thy seed to flourish, but the harvest shall be a heap in the day of grief and of desperate sorrow. Woe to the multitude of many people which make a noise like the noise of the seas, and to the rushing of the nations that make a rushing like the rushing of the mighty waters. The nation shall like the rushing of the many waters, but God shall rebuke them, and they shall flee far off, and shall be chased as the chaff of the mountains before the wind, and like a rolling thing before the whirlwind. And behold, at the evening tide trouble, and before the morning he is not. This is the portion of them that spoil us, and the lot of them that rob us.
Okay. So before we get into that, is there anything that you guys read in there that popped out based on passages we've already studied?
Well, there's going to be a big shaking in Israel, so we know that they're under siege.
Okay. Well, can we think of specific, because you're thinking metaphorically, but describing shaking, but can you think of specific passages that describe shaking?
Shaking's common, very common. The Lord will shake the earth at the second coming.
Right. But based on things that we've already studied in other passages, can you think of specific references to shaking?
Well, I'm thinking Joel 2, but I don't know if there's a shaking there.
I think there is. I think it says that they'll quake at my presence when the army's coming down. Remember how he kind of describes it twice, and he gets it right down to the army's about to get him, and then they repent, and then he kind of tells the story with more details, and the sun turns to darkness, the moon turns to blood. So in Revelation 6, what's happening as the sun is turning to darkness and the moon's turning to blood?
Is that a statement or a question?
That's a question.
Okay, say it again.
In Revelation chapter 6, when the sun turns to darkness and the moon turns to blood, do you remember what else is happening at that time?
Isn't that the sixth seal?
Yep. What else accompanies that sign?
There's got to be shaking of the earth at that time.
Right.
There's got to be.
So you have the earth shaking in Joel 2. You have the earth shaking in chapter 6. You have this, it says the shaking of an olive tree, and we're going to get into other passages that have shaking. And I'll just let you know for Ezekiel 38, you have the earth shaking at the Lord's presence there, okay? So it basically says that they're going to shake at the presence of the Lord, and the world is going to learn to fear God when the shaking happens, because Israel is going to be delivered, okay? Any other things that pop out at you guys?
In verse 9, I seen desolation.
Yeah. So
Verse 7 shows that people are looking for their maker. We don't see Israel turning until the end of Zechariah.
right. What about this right here? Because I'm going to interpret all this for you guys in order, but what I want you to do is kind of think of these key terms like harvest, right? What do you think the harvest is based on what we've seen?
We have a harvest in Revelation of the sickle. You know, the angel comes out with a sickle and harvests the earth.
Right. In the day of what?
Grief and desperate sorrow.
Right. And what do you think that's describing? What day is that?
Lord.
Right. So we have Damascus is the main part, but the other person in here is going to be Israel, okay? Because we see the glory of Jacob shall be made then, right? Just like in the Micah prophecy. In the Micah prophecy, we have Assyria giving them guff, and then Israel's fighting back and winning, but then God's disciplining Israel in Micah 5, remember? And he's making their idols go away, and he's destroying their strong cities. Remember that?
Uh-huh.
So when you guys take this passage and just line it right up with Micah 5 and go, is that the same things happening in the same order? It's the same things. But this is a new nugget. This is something that has never happened before in history. It's taken away from being a city. That means there's no more Damascus, okay? So this is a major, major milestone in your prophetic calendar, right? Damascus is the oldest inhabited city on planet Earth. That's how significant that is. No city on planet Earth has been populated longer than Damascus, and it's going to completely go away. It will not be a city anymore. So that's a major. And then the other thing is, so the nations rushing like many waters. This is kind of like all the nations coming down on Israel and Joel. And then this other thing is, this is the portion of them that spoil us and then them that rob us. That's what they're going to say when they take all the weapons and burn them for 7 years at the end of Ezekiel 38. So that's where this is kind of taken to us. And remember, with all these things in the Old Testament, with Joel, with Micah, it's going to kind of pop in and out of Daniel's 70th week. But you kind of have, this is the major thing, and then this is kind of your finish line, right? This is, notice this is, and behold, at evening time trouble, and in the morning he is not.
Right.
What did
That's
we just
Damascus, right? We're talking about Damascus still.
No, because he's talking about the people
No?
rushing like many waters here, and the Lord will
Okay.
rebuke them, and they shall flee far off. So what does that sound like? Remember where we read that?
Revelation, right?
No, that's in Joel 2. So this nation's coming down on them, and it says that God's going to drive them into the hindermost sea, into the eastern sea, remember? So you want to read this along with Joel 2 and kind of line that up. But remember what we just read last week about the ancient Assyrian invasion?
Mm-hmm.
When they went when it went down to nighttime, what was their situation?
They were screwed.
Right. But when they woke up in the morning, what was their situation?
Deliverance. They had 185,000 of the enemy dead, and they did
Right.
nothing.
So you see the parallels there? It's the
Mm.
exact same situation. But we know this somehow centers around Damascus being a city. So that's why I'm going to lay this out for you, what I think is going to happen politically. And I actually put this in my book. So if you guys get a chance to review that part, I have these illustrations that are pretty helpful, I think. Because he's literally describing a map of Israel and the West Bank and Damascus and the Golan Heights, like very specifically. So I want to show you guys these maps. Let's see. So I'm fully convinced Damascus is going to die by a nuclear storm, and I want you guys to see this ahead of time. These are the prevailing wind patterns in the Middle East, okay? So if a nuke were to get dropped in Damascus, and that's right here, let's see if I can draw on it. That's too small. I'll do this. Damascus is right there.
You're going to have some fallout.
Right. So Damascus is like right here. Where's the nuclear fallout going to go?
South
South and east, right?
and east. Mm-hmm.
So what is south and east of here? Is Israel in danger if this gets nuked right here?
No.
If any of Israel's nuked, what is the most danger they're gonna see? Assuming a nuke happens right here, maybe even some more nukes.
They're not gonna. That wind is not gonna get them.
It's gonna go away from them, right?
Right.
So is that a pretty safe battle strategy if you've got a innumerable army invading you?
Mm-hmm.
So this exact strategy they were going to do in North Korea back in the 50s. Remember, I don't know if you guys know the Korean War, but we basically had almost taken over all of Korea with the help of South Korea and our allies. And then the Chinese poured like 2 million troops in to push it back to the current border where it is right now. When we knew all those Chinese troops were coming, what MacArthur wanted to do was just drop a bunch of nukes in between the mountains and all the major passages that they'd have to go through, so they'd all just go through and die. And that's what I think Israel's going to do when this Northern Army comes. So I want to show you guys these pictures. So you remember how he's describing it. Whenever you hear the word corn in the Old Testament, they're referring to a kernel of grain. They don't have like yellow corn like we have there. This is what they would call corn in the King James. So do you see how this is how a sheaf of grain would be if you're holding it in your arm, right? It's skinny in the middle and then it pops out on top, and that's where your Your thing's all right.
Uh.
And here's Israel if it lost the West Bank. So it describes it, and it says that the cities of Eror are forsaken. They shall be for flocks which shall lie down, and none shall make them afraid. So those cities of Eror are going to be these cities that are going to be in in Syria around Damascus and in northern Jordan. So this is what I think Israel does. If Russia and Iran are allied together with all their northern allies to come invade Israel, Damascus is going to be the city where they stage their invasion. In other words, you don't want to have you want to have a forward base, right? But you want to have a backup place where you can get your supplies and stuff like that, and then move them up to your forward base so they don't just nuke your forward base and you're done, right? So what they do is they go back into Syria, and they have basically all their supply chain driven through Syria. That's where they get their food, their water, their ammunition, their fuel, all that stuff goes to Syria, right? And then that's where the majority of their troops probably are, because they're not going to just send them all into Israel at once. Well, it's also not, it's also another person's country. And if Russia and those guys are invading them, it would be an international incident for them to nuke another country that wasn't part of the invasion. See what I'm saying? So it's kind of a protection for them. But if Israel's on the brink of total destruction, they're going to nuke Damascus to keep them from being able to use that city to kind of house their army, right? And then they're going to probably nuke this border area up here to make it impossible for them to come through. Probably the Golan Heights and all this, because once they take the Golan Heights, they can just start shooting down at them. And so what you probably end up having, they're probably going to drop, honestly, some nukes probably along here too, to keep them from being able to come in this way. And once you do that, because this is actually where the path to Megiddo is, and this is where the armies would always come in old times. And so when they do that, they would obviously have to evacuate the West Bank settlements, otherwise their own people could potentially get some nuclear radiation. And all these cities here are all going to be abandoned. These people are just going to be out because the nuclear waste is going to be coming their way, right? So notice how he describes it. He says the cities of Aurora are forsaken. And then he says the fortress will cease from Ephraim. Think of Ephraim as the West Bank, because that was the core heartland of northern Israel, where Judah would be right here. Ephraim would be right here. Or I'm sorry, I think Jerusalem would be right here, and I think Ephraim would be like right here. Samaria. So he's saying the fortress of Ephraim will cease. What do you think that's referring to?
Yeah, it kind of sounds just like Isaiah's when Aram and Ephraim were going against Judah.
What does Israel always put in the West Bank?
The West Bank?
What are they always building? The UN's always talking about it. Everyone's always mad about it.
A wall?
They put a wall around it, but I'm saying in the West Bank, they were building fortified settlements.
Oh, yeah.
So like fortified villages and stuff, right? So those are the fortresses they're going to cease because all those Jews are going to be backing out of there, right?
Yeah.
So remember that, because when Ezekiel 38 happens, it says they're going up against the land of unwalled villages, right? Well, all your walled villages are in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, because that's where it's hostile territory. You go into the mainland of Israel, they don't have walled villages there. So if they're leaving all those fortresses because of potential nuclear fallout, now it's a land of unwalled villages, right?
Yeah. Is Bethlehem around there too?
Yeah, I don't know exactly where Bethlehem is. It's right around here somewhere, but it is
because when I was there, we weren't allowed to go over there.
Right,
So
that's Palestinian territory.
Yeah.
So what you're probably going to have is them probably doing some kind of nuclear wall, to create fallout to destroy any potential for those armies coming through. And then what's probably going to happen, because what's behind them is nuked, they're just going to go forward through it. And in Ezekiel 38, that's why they're cleaning up all the bodies and stuff like that, where they talk about how like some guys got to mark it, and then the barriers come and bury it. It's probably because they're literally going to have a bunch of radiated bodies falling and dying there. So that's what I believe is going to happen there. And then it says, in that day that comes to pass that the glory of Jacob shall be made thin and the fatness shall wax lean. So you saw that picture, right? And then it says it'll be as the harvestman gathers corn. That's why I had that reaping there, because it's like the edges of Israel are taken out, but then the top has got some fluff, right? And it says as gathering ears in the valley of Rephaim. And I think the valley of Rephaim is probably like just below the Gaza Strip, I think. And then the gleaning of grapes should be left in it, like the shaking of an olive tree, 2 or 3 berries on the top of the uppermost bough. So I believe these grapes or olive trees are probably going to be like cities or settlements or whatever. Like most of them are evacuated, but you have a few of them where there's still people. And then it says, at that day, man shall look to his maker and his eyes shall respect the Holy One of Israel. It's the same thing as Ezekiel 38. It's going to say in that day that the nations shall fear me, or whatever, like the nations will acknowledge that I'm the Lord who sent them into captivity. And then it says he will not look to his altars, the work of his hands. And what you're probably going to have happen in this point is you're going to have Israel get really religious. You're probably not going to have most of Israel be born again, but you're going to have some. But you're going to have the majority of them be like Old Testament religious at that point, because they are going to get this supernatural salvation. And then it says, in that day shall his strong cities be as a forsaken bough. So they're leaving all the fortified settlements. And then it says, because thou hast forgotten the God of thy salvation, hast not been mindful of the rock of thy strength, therefore shalt thou plant pleasant plants and shall set it with strange slips. I don't know what that means. Does anyone else have an idea?
Stood out to me, but I couldn't.
Strange slips. Let's see, it says a twig, vine, branch, slip. Oh, I know what that is. Another word for that is vine. I know exactly what that is. Check it. So he says this, because thou hast forgotten the God of your salvation, not been mindful of the rock of thy strength. Who's that?
Christ.
Therefore shalt thou plant pleasant plants and shall set it with strange slips. So this word can be translated vine. So shall set it with a strange vine. What do you think that is?
Antichrist.
Right. I can't believe they didn't translate that. Nobody knows what a slip is. So a slip is apparently the vine that you're planting a vineyard. That's what the slip is. So they're going to have pleasant plants, probably in the carnal sense, right? They're going to have material prosperity.
Right.
And she'll set it with strange slips, a strange vine. That's what it is, I'll bet. It's a type of the Antichrist. So notice it says, which is left because of the children of Israel, and there shall be desolation. Here's your Antichrist right here. And then in that day thou shalt make thy plant to grow, and in the morning shalt thou make thy seed to flourish, but the harvest shall be as a heap in the day of grief and desperate sorrow. So this is important. In the two harvests, which harvest gets the bad news? The wheat or the grapes?
Grapes.
Grapes, right? So this is a vine, and it's saying you're gonna plant it and it's gonna grow and it's gonna make the seed to flourish, but in the harvest it shall be a heap in the day of grief and desperate sorrow. So is that talking about the wheat or the grapes, you think?
The grapes.
Right. Now check it out up here though. And it shall be as when the harvestman gathers corn and reaps the ears in his arm. What do they talk about there? Wheat or grapes? Wheat, right? Mm-hmm. So yet gleaning grapes shall be left in it like the shaking of an olive tree, 2 or 3 berries in the uppermost bough. So it looks like you've got a mixture of wheat and grapes here in Israel, right? Mm-hmm. Now, this is kind of a separate thing. So this is almost like summarizing the whole prophecy, right? Woe to the multitude of many people which make noise like the noise of the sea, and to the rushing of nations like a rushing of mighty waters. This is right out of Joel 2, right? The nations shall rush like the rushing of mighty waters, and God will rebuke them, and they shall flee far off and shall be chased. And I would just want to see if they have the cross references right to Joel there. No, they don't. Let's compare that to Joel real quick.
Sounds like Psalm 83 also.
Yeah, I would agree. Land of dark gloominess, run through the city, the earth shall quake before them. The Lord shall utter his voice before his army. Then they turn to him. And then he says, behold, I will send you, look at that, corn and wine. And then he says, I will drive off the northern army to land barren and desolate, with his face towards the east sea and hinder parts toward the utmost feet. And his stink shall come up and his ill savor shall come up. So when we get into the version of this in Ezekiel 38, we're going to see how their stink comes up, okay? So that places us right in this ending, right at the end of the Joel 2 war, which is also going to be the Ezekiel 38 war. So I'm actually surprised. This is the portion of them that spoil us and the portion of them that rob us. Now, if you go to Ezekiel 38, or 39, I'm sorry. We'll talk about how they collect all the weapons and burn them for 7 years. And it says, and they shall spoil those that spoiled them and rob those that robbed them, said the Lord. See how that connects? So Isaiah was written like a couple generations before Ezekiel. So let's think of Ezekiel 38 as like a further clarification of what is said in Isaiah, Micah, and Joel, who are all roughly contemporary with each other. Ezekiel and Daniel and Jeremiah are going to be, like 100 years later. That makes sense? So that's one prophecy, and that's kind of, from the perspective of Israel and Damascus and this major event, it's given you another little piece of information that's going to help you understand the unfolding of that war, okay? Now we get into Isaiah 18, and this is going to help you understand another part that's going to be in Ezekiel 38. Do you remember how it says fire will fall on Magog and those who dwell safely in the isles?
Yep.
Remember how it says that Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish are going to say, have you come to take a spoil?
Yep.
Now, I used to always read that and go, people would say, oh, they're protesting the invasion of Israel, right? Until I realized, no. They're not saying, are you coming to take a spoil from Israel? They're saying, are you coming to take a spoil from us? Because they're getting invaded too. And that's what I believe. This is World War III, and it's basically going to be America, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, or the Arabian countries, against all Russia and all their allies. And so there's a prophecy. We'll get to that when we get to the Ezekiel part that actually directly connects Arabia with the invasion. And then obviously the merchants of Tarshish and those dwelling safely on the isles, that's us. So this is another version of that. So one of you guys want to pick that one up? And just go ahead and read the whole thing.
Isaiah 18.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, I can read it. All right. So Isaiah chapter 18. Woe to the land shadowing with wings, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, that sendeth ambassadors by the sea, even in vessels of bulrushes upon the waters, saying, go ye swift messengers to a nation scattered and peeled, to a people terrible from their beginning hitherto, a nation meted out and trodden down, whose land the rivers have spoiled. All ye inhabitants of the world and dwellers on the earth, see ye, when he lifteth up an ensign on the mountains, and when he bloweth a trumpet, hear ye. For so the Lord saith unto me, I will take my rest, and I will consider in my dwelling place like a clear heat upon herbs, and like a cloud of dew in the heat of harvest. For afore the harvest, when the bud is perfect, and the sour grape is ripening in the flower, he shall both cut off the sprigs with pruning hooks, and take away and cut down the branches. They shall be left together unto the fowls of the mountains and to the beasts of the earth. And the fowls shall summer upon them, and all the beasts of the earth shall winter upon them. And that time shall the present be brought unto the Lord of hosts of a people scattered and peeled. and from a people terrible from their beginning hitherto. A nation meted out and trodden underfoot, whose land the rivers have spoiled, to the place of the name of the Lord of hosts, the Mount Zion.
All right. Does anything pop out to you guys there?
Yeah, a lot.
There's a lot of meat there.
So it says that this place is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia.
Right. So when it's referring to the rivers of Ethiopia, what rivers are they referring to?
Would it be wish I had a map in front of me, but
I'm getting
You're saying to the west. We covered that before, to the west.
You say, what did you say, the Nile?
Yep. So the Nile actually has two heads, and those are going to be the Blue Nile and the White Nile. It's probably got other tributaries as well. See if I can get it to come up on the map here. You can't see it that clearly, but here's part of it. See this right here? And then here's the other part. So those are the rivers of Ethiopia. So Ethiopia is a highland. So it's like with the highest point of Africa. And most of the rivers in Africa flow down from Ethiopia, all in all directions. So Ethiopia is capitalizing on that hydroelectric power and selling it to the rest of Africa. That's how they're becoming powerful. And they're going to be the king of the South. But yeah, you the main ones are going to be the Blue and White Nile that start up in the hills and mountains of Ethiopia, and then they flow down through Sudan into the main Nile. Yeah, that's the main part, but it all starts up in Ethiopia. But you notice that Ethiopia, does Ethiopia look divided by rivers?
no.
No. I mean, even if you say, well, Ethiopia proper is like really like South Sudan, is it divided by rivers? No. It's got rivers flowing through it, right? But it's not really divided by rivers. So it's beyond, it's beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, which means it's not Ethiopia. Okay.
Right.
Sends ambassadors by the sea, even in vessels of bulrushes upon the water. So probably back in the day, this is how Ethiopia has made their boats and stuff. And so that's probably why they're making that connection, because a lot of these are going to have a, ancient and then future fulfillment to them. But then it says, go ye messengers to a nation scattered and peeled. Is that Ethiopia?
No.
No. So if it was, they would just say that's Ethiopia, right?
Right.
But it isn't. This is actually Cush, but to a people terrible from their beginning, that means up until the present, hitherto. A nation meted out and trodden down, whose lands the rivers are spoiled. So I am fully confident this is about America. We have been a warring people from day one. I mean, what our country has in common is war and pillaging. And we have never, people don't realize we are never not at war. Like you go back to the 7 Years' War before we were a nation. It was like one war after the other. It's like every 20, we don't go 10 years without a war. We've never not been bombing or attacking some other country or the people within our country when we were conquering the West, right? Then it says the nation meted out and trodden down. We have our entire nation broken up into counties. We have roads through everything, right? Whose lands the river has spoiled. And this is going to say spoiled or divided right here. And so when you get into the Hebrew here, this word scattered and peeled, check out what scattered means. It says to draw using a great variety of applications. So the literal means to draw. It means could be to march, remove, delay, be tall. Of course, the Sudanese are very tall. Draw, continue, defer, extend, forbear, give, handle, make, long, sow, scatter, stretch out. Okay. So I think this means spread out because it's stretched out, it's spread out. So either the individual people are tall or spread out or stretched out, right? Or the people are very spread out. So what's America known for having a lot of?
Urban sprawl.
Land, right? Just spread out
Land.
people, right? Not in these tight little cramped villages, right? Like all the rest of the countries in the world, we have a lot of like it's like again, the nation is meted out and trotted down, and the people are spread out. And check out what peeled means: obstinate, independent.
No.
Does that sound like a description of the American people?
Mm-hmm.
The nation's meted out. We've been at war from the beginning, and we're spread out and independent, right? Like that's a perfect description of the American people. So, and then it says, all you inhabitants of the world and dwellers on the sea, see ye when he lifteth up an ensign in the mountains, and when he bloweth a trumpet, hear ye. Who is he?
June 3.
Don't assume it's the Lord.
I was gonna say the president.
But based on the context of what came, you always want to look at what came before it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're never going to say a he without referring to something that came before this. So, go you to the land of shadowing wings. So who's the he referring to? That sends ambassadors by the sea, even in bulrushes, saying, "Go swift messengers," to a people from the beginning. So notice the land sends ambassadors saying, "Go swift messengers to a nation patterned and scattered and peeled, to a people terrible from their beginning outward, whose land the rivers have spoiled." So the he seems to be the land, right? The nation. Do we blow a trumpet to all the inhabitants of the world?
Yeah. Pretty much.
What do we say?
Democracy.
Right. Come here, be like us, right?
Yeah.
And dwellers on the earth. Is dwellers on the earth usually a good term?
No.
What does it usually refer to?
People hiding from the Lord.
For the carnal, right?
Carnal.
When he lifts up an ensign on the mountains and he blows a trumpet, hear ye, okay?
Mm.
So
the whole world's going to follow after them.
right. So again, we're in the same time frame, because the time frame of all this going down, when we read Ezekiel 38, America's downfall is going to be right before the Antichrist rises. So it says this: "For so the Lord said unto me, I will take my rest." What do you think that's referring to?
Dwelling in heaven.
Christ sitting at the right hand of the Father, right?
Mm-hmm.
I will go return to my place, right? I'll go take my rest. And I will consider in my dwelling place, so he's in heaven, like the clear heat upon the herbs, like a cloud of dew in the heat of harvest. Okay. So this is what he's waiting for: the clear heat upon the herbs and a cloud of dew in the heat of harvest. So he's waiting for the harvest. What's the harvest?
The rapture.
Right. For the harvest, that's before the harvest. When the bud is perfect, that means the bud is mature. When the bud is mature, what comes next?
The flower and fruit.
Right. So this is before the fruit's ready, right? And the sour grape is ripening in the flower, right? So the bud precedes the wheat. The sour grape precedes the grapes. See that?
Mm-hmm.
In verse 4, the dew sounds just like the dew in Isaiah 26, saying that your dead will live.
I don't know that one.
It's basically a resurrection passage. It's verse 1 of 26. Isaiah 26. Your dead will live. Like the dew, they evaporate from earth.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look at that. Yeah, it could. Yeah,
It's resurrection.
mark that and we'll look at that when we're done, okay? Another thing, this could be like the latter rain, cloud of dew in the heat of harvest. But I want to read what you just mentioned first before I draw that conclusion. So then, anyways, he's giving you a time frame of when this is, right? We're approaching the rapture, right? We're not there yet. We're approaching it, right? It says, he shall cut off the sprigs with the pruning hooks and take away and cut down the branches. So what are sprigs?
Good question.
You know what a shoot is on a tree? I just cut off a bunch of them. So I have this tree in my front yard, and it grows these really cool little purple flowers up and down the stalk of the tree. But if I leave it alone, it will grow these shooter branches, and they're basically like skinny branches that just go straight up because they're trying to get to the sun before they really grow any leaves. And so they just grow straight up in the air. But they don't ever bear fruit because they're not situated in such a place to get to the sun soon enough. They basically, they show up late, you know, and then they try to just grow from wherever they can. And those are usually when you see trees that just shed branches, you know, it's usually those kind of branches that end up falling off and dying because they never really get established. So remember how Jesus cuts off the branches that don't bear any fruit?
Right.
Yeah.
So he says he cuts off the sprigs with pruning hooks. Those are the branches that don't bear fruit, and takes away and cuts down the branches, right? Now, if the people in America bearing fruit are the Christians, and the people who aren't bearing fruit are the, you know, godless, right? Where are most of the godless in America situated?
East and West Coast.
East and West Coast, right? Remember those who dwell safely in the coast, right? That's what Ezekiel 38 is going to bring us to, right? So if you look at America, remember how the last one was just describing a map of Israel, right? Can you see a tree? Look closely. I mean, it's all around, right? But what's at the very bottom under a tree?
The roots.
And then you got the
Bundle of
stalk,
roots,
right?
the trunk, and then
you got
branches.
the foliage of the tree, right?
Yeah.
So the outside, those are your branches, right? And then this is your foliage, right? So he's going to cut off the shoots. What do you think shoots might represent? I mean, we know they're not fruit-bearing branches, but think physical geography and economics and politics and cities and stuff like that. What do you think a shoot represents?
Like the colonies and
Or like the islands and like the just like the Caribbean islands and like the Central and America, Mexico and stuff like that.
But here's your qualifications for what a shoot or a sprig is. It grows up really quickly and tall, but never bears fruit. What do people move to the big cities on the coast to do?
Make money.
Get rich quick, right?
Yep.
Whether it's that LA game or that San Francisco, right? That Bay Area or New York and that stock market, right? Or Atlanta and that all that trade going on there. They move out to these places for the big money, right? They shoot up fast, they don't bear any fruit. So he's telling you now that he's going to cut all that down, right?
Right.
And then it says they will be left together unto the fowls of the mountains and the beasts of the earth. Okay. So these branches, these outward get rich quick cities are going to be left to the fowls of the mountains. What are the fowls, do you think? Demons. And the beasts of the earth. What are the beasts of the earth, do you think?
Nations.
Right.
Yeah, the nations.
What nations are the beasts of the earth, do you think?
The kingdoms, the 10 kingdoms.
Right. So what's going to happen to America? He's telling you is they'll be left to the fowls of the mountains. Remember those wicked cities, right? Now, all the worst cities that are getting the most rioting and looting and people dying and government tyranny and all that stuff, where are they located?
East and West Coast.
East and West Coast, right?
Mhm.
You think maybe the demons are sitting on them right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says the fowls shall summer on them, right?
Mm.
And the beasts shall winter on them, right?
Uh,
Now, remember, this
Wow.
is before the harvest, right? When does harvest come? In the fall, right? So
Yeah.
up until the rapture, demons are going to take over these places. That's what we're going through right now, right?
Mhm.
After the rapture, the physical land is going to be taken over by these other nations. We
mm,
get wrapped up into the kings of the east and the Antichrist and all their territories, right? So that's what he's telling you. This is how it's going to go down. And they're going to be like probably nuked, and it's going to be like Mad Maxville and zombies and people eating each other and stuff like that in these places. Like, I have no interest in moving. Like, if people I know who are secular are moving away from these cities, like the writing is on the wall and it ain't pretty. They're not even believers and they see what's coming. Like, it's going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. And these governors and these mayors are turning into just these tyrants, in these cities. They're becoming all like Al Caponeville. And so it says, in that time shall the present be brought to the Lord of hosts of a people scattered and peeled. So of a people who are spread out and independent, a present is going to be brought to the Lord of hosts from a people terrible from their beginning hitherto, a nation meted out and trodden underfoot, whose lands the rivers have spoiled. And so it's describing those people again and again. So the Americans are going to bring a present to the place name of the Lord of hosts, the Mount Zion. Is that unclear where it's going to be brought to?
no.
What do you think the present is? I've heard people say it's the Ark of the Covenant. I promise you will absolutely know when we're done with Ezekiel 38.
The Jewish people
It's the Jewish people. Where are the most Jewish people outside of Israel?
in America.
In
New York.
America.
America.
Yeah.
We're going to bring their people back, right? So it actually says that at the end of the Ezekiel 38 war, it says he gathers every one of his people from every place that he scattered them. So what our present, when we're humbled and broken down from being the world's superpower, the last thing we do is help the Jews go back to the promised land.
Yep.
This is the downfall of America right here. I could show this to 100 pastors and they won't see it, because look how many little tiny pieces of symbology do you need to understand to see that that's America, right?
Right.
But again, it's this nation beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, because there was no predecessor people to say here it's Magog, right?
Right.
That's why it says, fire falls on Magog, which we know as a place and we know as a people, and those who dwell safely in the Isles, which we don't have a people name for, right? Because America's not really a true biblical nation. We have no common ancestors. We're just a mixed group of people. We are from all the inhabitants of the earth and dwellers on the earth coming to the inside of the mountains. Now check this out, the inside of the mountains. Do you guys remember our famous song? America the Beautiful. Who knows the words? Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed its grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. That was written in the War of 1812, when we really beat England and secured our independence. So that's our ensign to the nations. We're the land of brotherhood. We have no common father. We're the fraternal brotherhood. See? And that was a Masonic thing too. So that's who we are. That's the inside of the mountains, the Purple Mountains Majesty, right? And so as Israel is going through this, we're going through this. And Ezekiel 38 is going to combine those two things together. We'll talk about that when we get there. Now, This is talking about Egypt. This is the last one we'll do, and we'll call it a night. So why don't we have somebody read through? Go ahead and just read through the whole thing, one of you, if you want to.
All right. Let's see. Isaiah chapter 19. The burden of Egypt. Behold, the Lord rideth upon a swift cloud, and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother, and every one against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. And the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof, and they shall seek to the idols, and to the charmers, and to them that have familiar spirits, and to the wizards. And the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel Lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them, saith the Lord of hosts. And the waters shall fail from the sea, and the river shall be wasted and dried up, and they shall turn the river far away, and the brooks of defense shall be emptied and dried up. The reeds and flags shall wither. The paper reeds by the brook, by the mouth of the brooks, and everything sown by the brooks shall wither, be driven away, and be no more. The fishers also shall mourn, and all they that cast angle into the brooks shall lament, and they that spread nets upon the water shall languish. Moreover, they that work in fine flax, and they that weave networks shall be confounded, and they shall be broken in the purposes thereof. All that make, I don't know what that word is, sluices and ponds for fish.
I don't know what that is either.
Surely the princes of Zoan are fools. The counsel of the wise counselors of Pharaoh is become brutish. How say ye unto Pharaoh, I am the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings? Where are they? Where are they, thy wise men? And let them tell thee now, and let them know what the Lord of hosts have purpose upon Egypt. The princes of Zoan are become fools. The princes of Noph are deceived. They have also seduced Egypt, even they that are the state of the tribes thereof. The Lord have mingled a perverse spirit in the midst thereof, and they have caused Egypt to err in every work thereof, as a drunken man staggereth in his vomit. Neither shall there be any work for Egypt, which the head or tail, branch or rush may do. In that day shall Egypt be like unto women, and it shall be afraid and fear because of the shaking of the hand of the Lord of hosts, which he shaketh over it. And the land of Judah shall be a terror unto Egypt. Everyone that maketh mention thereof shall be afraid in himself because of the counsel of the Lord of hosts, which he hath determined against it. And that day shall 5 cities in the land of Egypt speak the language of Canaan, and swear to the Lord of hosts. One shall be called the city of destruction. And that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord. And it shall be for a sign and for a witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt, for they shall cry unto the Lord because of the oppressors, and he shall send them a savior, and a great one, and he shall deliver them. And the Lord shall be known to Egypt, and the Egyptians shall know the Lord in that day, and shall do sacrifice and oblation. Yea, they shall vow a vow unto the Lord and perform it. And the Lord shall smite Egypt. He shall smite and heal it, and they shall return even to the Lord. And he shall be entreated of them, and shall heal them. And that day shall there be a highway out of Egypt to Assyria. And the Assyrian shall come into Egypt, and the Egyptian into Assyria. And the Egyptians shall serve with the Assyrians. And that day shall Israel be the third with Egypt and with Assyria, even a blessing in the midst of the land, whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, Blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, mine inheritance.
That has a happy ending, doesn't it?
Yeah, after all that.
So what you end up having, this is going to all be in the millennium here.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord is basically going to, it looks like 5 cities in the land of Egypt shall speak the language of Canaan. It
Mhm.
looks like probably maybe that's Arabs in the Palestinian states, or maybe it's Hebrews that colonize it. But what's probably going to happen is everybody who's not Jewish is going to be kicked out of the land of Israel or Hebrew, you know what I mean? And those people are probably going to go to Egypt in the millennium. But there's going to be open borders from Assyria to Egypt under the peace of the Lord, because that's really going to be his domain. So before that, we kind of, remember, just like in the other one, we have the Lord sitting up in his place waiting for the harvest. Here we had the Lord riding on a swift cloud, and he shall come into Egypt. So this is kind of like the what do you call it when you're writing a paper and that's your opening statement? What's that called?
Introduction, preamble.
No,
Epilogue.
no. It's a word that basically means your thesis statement, kind of like this is the main point. You know what I'm saying? So he just summarized this whole thing, that the Lord's going to be riding on a swift cloud, and the Egyptians will be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt will melt in the midst of it. So again, remember, the Lord rises up to shake the earth with his presence before the rapture. Okay. And then he comes back and actually raptures the people. But in that time, he's basically set Egypt to chaos. Has Egypt been in kind of a chaos state?
It's not what it's used to. It's not really chaos though.
Not as much anymore. It was during the Arab Spring, right?
Right.
But we don't really know what's going on in Egypt too much right now. It's not in the news that much, but it does say, in the Egyptian side will give over to the hand of the cruel Lord. Who do you think that is? A fierce king to rule over them. Right. Remember what the Antichrist does before he goes and commits the abomination of desolation?
Like he starts conquering.
Right. And Egypt shall not escape from his hands, right?
Right.
And then it says, and the waters shall fail from the sea, and the river shall be wasted and dried up. You know what's going on in Egypt right now with the river, Nile River? You want to look up the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. It's literally drying up the Nile right now. So Ethiopia, remember I told you they're capitalizing, making all this hydroelectric power to sell to all the other African nations.
Right.
They're making themselves the power supplier for all of Africa. That's how they're becoming a superpower. And one of the things they're doing to do that is they've been building this great Renaissance dam and drying up the Nile River, because they got to fill up the dam so the water can flow over to power their turbines or whatever, their dynamometers or whatever. And that turning of those things is what caused the electricity to come. And so it's going to take like 3 to 5 years to do it. And Egypt's protesting. They don't have any military capacity to do anything about it because their country's in such a mess. But basically they're saying this is going to dry up the Nile. It won't permanently dry it up. But if you know, when a river gets dammed, that river is never the same afterwards. It's always like a smaller version of it, because they're controlling all that water pressure to create the electricity. So they're never letting it flow to the capacity that it used to. And then this whole valley that you see right here, that's all going to be a lake, one big, huge lake. So Ethiopia is going to have this massive new bunch of lakefront property and, expand their economy and do all this stuff. And then all this hydroelectric power. And meanwhile, Egypt is getting biblical right now. Look at this. That's the Nile. You see, that's the Nile. And so it's just shrinking, and they're saying that's just going to keep getting worse. So that's going to impoverish Egypt. It's going to destroy their economy. That's why it's saying no one will have anything to do, because their entire economy, their real estate, their tourism, they're farming, because that's the major part. I think they grow a lot of cotton there. And then they're fishing, like the angler, that's the fishing pole guys and the fishing net guys. They're going to have no economy. That's what it's telling them. And they're basically going to be given over to the Antichrist. If Egypt loses all their economy, what's the only source of economic power that they still have?
Egypt.
Yeah.
Tourism.
Little bit.
Tourism's dead.
Pyramids, but there's one thing that is the major source of economic power in Egypt. It's so important that Israel, England, and France tried to take it from them in the 70s.
Suez Canal.
Right, and we stopped them. They had the Suez Canal. And that's the last piece of the puzzle that the Antichrist is going to grab to make sure he has economic dominance over the whole world. So basically, they're given over to this perverse spirit. That's the spirit of delusion, the Lord sending on the whole earth, right? And then the Antichrist basically takes over their country. So remember, the Antichrist is really taking over Iraq and Syria after this war. So it's not really like many people are going to be protesting, because these lands have been wasted, right? And he's probably not going to oppress them, but then he goes in to take over Egypt and he oppresses them. And they cry out to Jesus. Remember, there are Christians in Egypt, Coptic Christians, there always has been. And probably some of the people getting kicked out of the West Bank and Gaza Strip are Christians too, because there are Christians there. And then Egypt's going to be oppressed, and they're going to cry out to the Lord. And it says, and he will send them a savior and a great one, and he shall deliver them. So they're literally talking about what's going to happen to Egypt before Christ comes on a cloud. And one of the main things that we have is another milestone right here is that the Nile is going to be dried up, which is currently happening. And they're saying this is going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years. So what does that tell you about when all these wars and stuff are going to go down?
Quick before that.
I mean, yeah, you're talking. We could be in the apex of these wars and stuff like that in the next 5 years. I mean, that's 2026. We're still just, the 2000th anniversary of Christ's death and resurrection is just 8 years after that. No, it's 7 years after that. So, I mean,
Ethiopia will still have a knob to always turn off the water at any time.
Right. They can do it if they want to. And that's the thing. That's what Turkey's got going on for them as well. And that's why you can see how Turkey and Ethiopia, king of the north and king of the south, right? That's why they're so powerful, is because they have power over the waters. So you can see how, again, he says he shakes his hand at them or whatever, right? So you can see how all these things are kind of parallel. Like they all dip into further on out, but they're all kind of focused around this time when the Lord rises to shake the earth, right? There's other ones, but honestly, I haven't really dug into all these other ones to really understand. Like this one I think has to do with honestly Saudi Arabia and Edom and stuff, but I don't know it as well. But those were the main ones I wanted to show you. And then there's a couple more here. Isaiah 24, 16 to 24. It says, from the uttermost part of the earth, we have sung songs. Oh, wait. It says, behold, the Lord shall make the earth empty and make it waste and turn it upside down and scatter abroad the inhabitants thereof. And it shall be as with the people, so with the priest, and as the servant, so with his master, and as with the maid, so is her mistress, as the buyer, so with her seller, as the lender, so is with borrower, as the taker of usury, and the one who gives usury to him. The land shall be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled, for the Lord has spoken his word. The earth mourneth and fadeth away, the world languishes and fadeth away. The haughty people of the earth do languish. The earth is also defiled, and the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broke the everlasting covenant. What does that sound like they've done? What's the everlasting covenant?
The new covenant.
Second covenant.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Change the ordinance. So if they've broken the everlasting covenant, what must they have done?
They going back to the old covenant.
Right. Therefore he has cursed, the curses devour the earth, and they shall dwell therein. They that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men are left. Okay. So this is kind of talking about end times, right?
Mhm.
The new wine mourneth, the vine languisheth, the merry hearted do sigh, the mirth of tabrets ceaseth, the north noise of them that rejoice endeth, and the joy of the harp ceaseth. They shall not drink wine with a song. Strong drink shall be bitter to them that drink it. The city of confusion is broken down. Every house is shut up, and no man may come in. What city do you think this is? The city of confusion.
Would it be Jerusalem?
There's crying for wine.
Babylon.
Mystery Babylon. That's what I think. All joy is dark, and the mirth of the land is gone. In the city is left desolation, and the gate is smitten with destruction. So yeah, this probably has some connotations to Jerusalem, and then Neom or whatever is Mystery Babylon in the end. And thus it shall be in the midst of the land among the people, there shall be as the shaking of an olive tree. This is what you were talking about, right, Randy? As the shaking of an olive tree, as the gleaning of grapes, as when the vintage, when it's done. So that's just like in Zechariah. They shall lift up their voice, and they shall sing, for the majesty of the Lord shall cry aloud from the sea. Wherefore glorify the Lord in the fires, yet in the name of the Lord God of Israel, even the name of the Lord God of Israel in the isles of the sea. So this doesn't sound like it's talking about the utter destruction of all the earth, because it's saying glorify the Lord in the fires, even the name of the Lord God of Israel in the isles of the sea. So the isles of the sea is another name for saying the coastlands. And I think this might be talking about America. And the fires, remember the fire falls on Magog and those who dwell safely in the isles or coastlands. From the uttermost part of the earth we have heard songs, even glory to the righteous. But I said, my leanness, woe unto me. The treacherous dealers have dealt treacherously. Yea, the treacherous dealers have dealt treacherously. Why do you think they're saying that in the relation to the destruction of America by fires? What are all our preachers telling us?
That God is protecting America.
Right. And what is all the American preachers telling you? What's going to cause the downfall of America?
War.
No.
No.
Think about what the popular Christian preachers are saying. Are any of them saying America's going down?
No.
They've been saying this since I was a kid. What are they telling you is ultimately going to cause the downfall of America?
Morality, right?
Nope. There's a certain event that causes America to stop being the superpower of the world, according to these preachers.
I don't know.
Okay. So your pre-tribulation rapture people have always been preaching that America stays on top until the rapture. And then it falls down because all the Christians are gone.
Yeah.
But it's not going to go.
Holding it up.
Church is gone.
Yeah. So notice it says, from the uttermost part of the earth that we have heard songs saying, glory to the righteous.
Wow.
To who?
To the righteous.
Right. Who are they praising?
Themselves,
right? But I said, my leanness, woe unto me. Who's saying my leanness?
Christ.
Right. What's lean?
His body.
His body's lean, right? Woe unto me. My body is lean, right?
Right.
He's been fasting. Means his body isn't so big as it looked, right?
Right.
When the trials come, all of a sudden that body of Christ doesn't look so big. The treacherous dealers have dealt treacherously. Yea, the treacherous dealers have dealt treacherously. Who are the treacherous dealers?
Pulpit preachers.
The hirelings, right?
Money preachers.
Now listen to this. Fear and the pit and snare are upon thee, O inhabitant of the earth. And it shall come to pass that he who flees from the noise of the fear shall fall into the pit. and he that comes up out of the midst of the pit shall be taken in a snare. For the windows from on high are open, and the foundations of the earth do shake. What do you think that's talking about? What do you think the pit is? What else happens when the earth shakes and the sun turns to darkness and the moon turns to blood?
Oh yeah,
People die.
isn't the earth supposed to open up and then demons come out?
That happens after, but as the earth is shaking, the sun turns to darkness, the moon turns to blood. The rich men, the bondmen, the free men, they all go to the rocks and the caves and say, "Fall on us and hide us from the wrath of the Lamb," right?
Right.
So it says, "He who flees from the noise," what's the noise?
The shaking of the earth.
Right. The Lord arising and shaking the earth. Of the fear shall fall into the pit. That's falling, running and hiding in the rocks. And that he that comes out of the pit shall be taken in a snare. For the windows from on high are open and the foundations of the earth do shake. So I'm going to get to this coming out of the pit in just a minute. It says, the earth is utterly broken down. The earth is clean dissolved. The earth is moved exceedingly. So again, this is something that hasn't already yet connotation, because it's going to, all this stuff is going to happen in a temporary form at the end of Revelation 6. And that's going to lead people to think we're in the eternal state or the eternal kingdom, right? The deceived. But it's going to happen more permanently at the end of the millennium, where the elements melt with a fervent heat and the whole earth is burned up, right? But this says the earth is utterly broken down. The earth is clean dissolved. The earth is moved exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall be removed like a cottage, and the transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall punish the hosts of the high ones that are on high, and the kings of the earth upon the earth. What are the high ones that are on high?
The angels, principalities, fallen angels.
And what are the kings of the earth upon the earth?
The 10 kingdoms, the leaders of the 10 kingdoms.
Right. So, well, probably before this, because again, I think this might be talked about after they come out of the pit, because it does say, the kings and the freemen and every, leader and whatever. It says, and they shall be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in a pit, and shall be shut up in the prison, and after many days they shall be visited. Then it says,
Sounds like the sheep and goats.
What's that?
Sounds like sheep and goats.
Right. So this is part of my Millennium Underground thing. See, there's a type of this in the story of Joshua when he comes and fights all these kings, and the kings go and hide in a cave, and they roll boulders on top of them, and they come to deal with them after they're done fighting the war. Well, Jesus is going to basically allow these people to flee into the pit, bury them down in there, and they're going to live in the underground. And then Jesus is going to subdue the whole earth. And then at the end of the millennium, they come up again and they get judged. Does that make sense? So then it says, then the moon shall be confounded. This is one of the very few places that I prefer the NIV translation. The word they use for confounded is abashed. You know what abashed means?
Blushing.
Blushing, right? So the moon shall be blushing. What color is blushing?
Red.
And the sun shall be ashamed.
Covered, dark.
Right. Hiding, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's another way from saying the sun will be turned to darkness, the moon to blood, when the Lord of hosts shall reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem and before his ancients gloriously. So this is why I developed the theory that what causes the sun to turn to darkness and the moon to turn to blood is the New Jerusalem. Because notice it says the moon shall be confounded and the sun shall be ashamed. That's the sun turned to darkness and the moon turned to blood. When the Lord of hosts shall reign in Mount Zion and Jerusalem before his ancients gloriously, right? So how big is the Lord's kingdom in the millennium?
Huge.
Right. It extends from Egypt to Assyria, right?
Mm-hmm.
How big is the New Jerusalem?
Half the volume of the moon.
Right. Can you see how it might just be resting over the earth, like just hovering over the earth?
Comes down.
Right. So it talks about how in the city of the New Jerusalem, there's no sun there because the Lord is the light thereof, right? So could you see how maybe the light from New Jerusalem is literally illuminating the planet underneath while the
Yeah.
Lord is reigning in Zion? And it seems to be that these people are going to be in the pit, and then after many days they're going to be visited. So that's why I have these arrows, Isaiah 2 and 24. Isaiah 2 is going to get into that as well, with them going down to the pit. So then Isaiah 2 we'll get into real quick, and we'll call that a wrap. This is right in the beginning. He says, shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and he shall be exalted above the hills, and the nations shall flow into it. So this is the Lord ruling from Mount Zion in the millennium. And then it says this, it says, enter into the rock and hide thee in the dust for fear of the Lord and for the glory of his majesty. The lofty looks of man shall be humbled, and the haughtiness of men shall be bowed down, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. So they're in the rocks while the Lord is exalted in that day. That's the day of the Lord or the millennium. Okay. The day of the Lord of hosts shall be upon everyone that is proud and lofty, and upon everyone that is lifted up, and he shall be brought low. And upon all the cedars of Lebanon, and the high and lifted up, and upon all the oaks of Bashan, and upon all the high mountains, and upon all the hills that are lifted up, and upon every high tower, and upon every fenced wall, and upon the ships of Tarshish, and upon all the pleasant pictures, and the loftiness of man shall be bowed down, and the haughtiness of man shall be made low, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day. And the idols he shall utterly abolish, and they shall go into the holes of the rocks and into the caves of the earth for fear of the Lord and for the glory of his majesty when he arises to terribly shake the earth. In that day shall a man cast his idols of silver and his idols of gold, which they made, each one for himself to worship, to the moles and to the bats, to go to the clefts of the rock and to the tops of the jagged rocks for fear of the Lord, for the glory of his majesty, when he arises to terribly shake the earth. Cease ye from man whose breath in his nostrils, who wherein shall be accounted of. So even though this sounds like it's all happening at once, we know from Revelation and other passages, they go and do this before the Lord gets there. So see how they're going to stash their idols underground so they can continue to worship them, right? Have any of you guys seen the movie Oblivion with Tom Cruise in it? Watch that movie because it's really interesting. So
Yeah, I seen it. I seen that one.
okay, so remember the giant space station that's floating above them?
Yep.
What's it called?
I only seen it one time, but I know it had a biblical name, didn't it?
It's called the Tet.
No, I don't. What, the tent?
The Tet, T-E-T.
Oh no, I don't remember.
Tetragrammaton.
Right. The Tet. Look, it's a triangle, and
Yep.
it's called the Tet. What is the Tetragrammaton, Randy?
Well, that's Yod He Vav He, but the Tetragrammaton. But that's like covalent four bonds. 1, 2, 3. It's a pyramid.
Right, but
Diamond.
What is the
Coal.
Tetragrammaton to a Jew, though?
God, Yahweh.
God, right?
Yep.
So in this movie, here's this giant space station hovering over the earth, and it's got these other things that are sucking away all the earth's water. It's an alien, right? And it clones Tom Cruise and this other astronaut who went to check it out, and then they invade Earth and take it over, right? So check this out. They go up to it, and then they come back down, and they attack all the dwellers on the earth, right? And they're all clones of each other, right? They're all made in the image of the optimal man and woman. That's why they cloned them.
Yep.
Because they were their best astronauts, so they were literally like the prime human beings. So they cloned those people to make their army to come back and kill them, right? And then the rest of humanity is living underground, and they're led by Morgan Freeman, who's just always leading in apocalyptic scenarios. And he gives them this book. He gives them this book that has this line in it, and it says, then out, it's an ancient Roman tale. It says, then spake out brave Horatius, the captain of the gate, to every man upon this earth, death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods? And that's kind of like their theme as they go up and plant a nuke in this Tet and destroy it to save the earth. So like the world is already getting primed to think we're going to fight the New Jerusalem and destroy it, right? It's the Death Star, right? We're going to figure out how to destroy this thing, and we're going to be set free from this alien invader, right? And they're slowly integrating the science fiction and the fantasy into reality as we get closer and closer to this date. So when it happens, it's like, oh, there's the Tet, all we needed. And notice how we always seem to destroy the alien mothership with like one shot or one nuke. Almost as if like these people figured out how to open up wormholes and come across the multiverse, but they never figured out how to deal with one nuclear bomb. Like that's just the apex of all technology, right? like Thanos is like rain fire, but he doesn't rain one single nuke and just destroy everybody. Like somehow all the aliens of the world haven't figured out nukes. We're the only ones who got them, right? Like, I mean, Iron Man, Independence Day, you know, Oblivion. It's just like one movie after another. All we just need is one nuke, and we somehow destroy the most advanced civilizations that are out there because they just never saw one nuclear missile coming. Like, oh man, they have this really big bomb. Like, all we have is literally a city the size of half their planet, and then the idea of like you can destroy something the size of half the planet with one nuke, right? It's just insane. But this is the insanity of man. Like, we can beat God. All we just need to do is just shoot one little photon missile down that little vent, right? And we just use the force, just like drop one little M80 in that toilet and it just goes boom, right? And this is the vanity of man. But like God's telling you how it's really going to go down, which is they're going to go gather underground, try to keep all their idols, try to stay about it down there. And then when they come up, it's curtains for them because God was prepared for what they're doing the whole time. And that's why I want to write that story, because it's really the story about how does Satan turn the whole earth to war at the end. And the reason is because he has these people underground who've been worshiping him the whole time. And then they come up and they corrupt the earth and get them all to try to fight Jesus again. So that's my next book that I'm going to try to work on when I'm done with this New Testament translation. But that kind of takes us into the Gog-Magog invasion, and that's the last one of these prophecies that's going to bring us into Revelation 6. And so you kind of see how they overlap, but they're all kind of priming you for this pseudo apocalypse, right? Like if I just had those passages like that one I just read in Isaiah, doesn't it kind of seem like it's all over once this happens?
It feels like it.
After that, like they all have gaps in them, and most people don't realize that there's always going to be these gaps, and sometimes that gap will be Daniel's 70th. Like in Joel leaves out Daniel's 70th week for the most part if you don't know how to read it right. And like Ezekiel 38 leaves out, or Ezekiel, just the whole book of Ezekiel leaves out Daniel's 70th week. And you have to like reconcile Daniel with these other things to go, well, wait a minute though. When does the Antichrist take over Egypt? But remember, God's sending upon them a great delusion, right? And the world's going to go back to Judaism, right? So the Jews are going to have all these prophecies, but what they don't have is what we have, which is the New Testament, right? So they're not sorting out the abomination of desolation like we are. They're not sorting out the book of Revelation like we are. They're looking at Joel and Ezekiel and Isaiah and stuff like that. And once the Lord arises to shake the earth, well, we must rule and reign before then, right? But outside of the book of Daniel, you don't really have any book that's flat out telling you you're going to fall for an Antichrist, right? It's always encoded like, oh, you're going to fall for a false vine, right? Like, what's a false vine? Well, you don't know what a false vine is until you have Jesus telling you, I am the vine, right?
Right.
So it's like he's setting up everybody who didn't love Jesus to believe the Antichrist is the Lord. And that's probably the primary thing that's distinct from my eschatology than any other one I read, is that I believe there's a pseudo apocalypse. And I mean, imagine all this stuff happening, right? It's like wars, pestilence, the quarter of the earth dies, then the sun turns to darkness, the moon turns to blood. If you don't know eschatology well, isn't your intellect going to tell you this has got to be the end times? Right? And when it starts to get peaceful for a bit after that, isn't your intellect going to tell you this must be the millennium?
Yeah.
Right? And when they start to tell you that there's this guy in the Middle East who's taken over the Middle East, he's the returned Lord, right? Because one of the signs in here is the stars falling from heaven. What do you think that could be? It's obviously not a literal star, right?
Meteors.
Could be meteors. What else could it be, though?
Principalities.
Yeah, that's a spiritual connotation, right? Of the angels falling. What else could it be?
Maybe nukes.
What's getting put up in the sky left and right now?
Satellites.
Yeah,
Satellite.
42,000 satellites are being put up by Amazon and Tesla. So if the Lord rises up with the New Jerusalem and shakes the whole earth, what if all these satellites just drop to the ground and all of a sudden not everybody has internet anymore unless they're in the big cities and they're hardwired to it. See? And now the communications are very limited, right? Because you don't have any satellites to spread TV signals around. You're only getting your information from that hardline internet. And that hardline internet is going to say, Christ came. He's here. We all saw it. Right? They can deep fake it, right?
Right.
Look, he looks just like the Jesus in the pictures. And they'll have a white version of white Jesus and a Jerry curl version of black Jesus. Like, look.
What about those underground? You heard about those underground, like where all those 18-wheelers they go underground in the cities? Like, you think that has anything to do with?
Yes, they have. Okay, both us, Russia, and China, at least that I know have. Us and Russia, we've been boring underground since the nukes were developed.
Right.
First, just to have basic shelters for our chain of command when the nukes hit, but they started doing that in 1945. So think about how long they've had 80 years to do this, man.
Right.
Or 60, yeah, about 80 years. It's gonna be 80. So I mean, you think how much drilling you could do in 80 years and how big these cities probably are right now, right? They got it plotted, man. You listen, you would know if you were on the list. We ain't on the list. You got
right.
You got to join clubs that we tend not to be a part of because we're outcasts. But when it comes down to it, I mean, think about what's going to go on. You're going to have lockdowns, wars, pestilences, and persecution happening, right?
Right.
So think of how many people are already disappearing, right? Mm-hmm. Would you even notice if, let's say, 100 million people went underground? What's a quarter of the earth? How many people is that?
What, over 2 billion?
Right. If 2 billion people are dying, are you going to even notice if 250 million of them go underground?
No.
You're not going to notice at all, are you?
You're gonna actually be so thankful you made it. You're not even gonna really look around like that.
Right. And you see like all the restrictions they're putting on travel and stuff right now, right?
Right.
So this is actually, maybe I'll read this to you guys one of these days, but I wrote the introduction for my book like several years ago. And I literally wrote this down because in my story, it's a husband and wife, and the husband's an engineer in the Freemasons, and his wife's like an actress and an engineer. Like that's what they do for a living.
Uh-huh. And
the wife gets duped into going underground. The husband set it all up and she didn't really want to. And so it's going to be like a descendant of theirs, like 1,000 years later, that comes up from underground and ends up getting saved. When I wrote the intro, I literally wrote this down, that these people, when they finally go underground, the sun's turning to darkness, the moon's turning to blood, and it's shaking. But in the context of this, I kid you not, like I was actually, do you guys want to read it right now? It's just like a page or two.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it's when the stuff started happening with the pandemic, I wanted to read this online, and I'm just like, nobody's gonna believe this that I wrote this down. Let's see, because I've been having this idea for a book was before I wrote my Revelation book. So the reason I wrote my Revelation book is because this story needed to have the Revelation stuff be history. So I had to nail all this stuff down to say, we're talking about it as if it already happened with the Antichrist and all that 1,000 years ago, right? So that's what led me to do it. And I've been working on outlining this thing I started this in 2013. And I think there's a swear words in it. So, but I got this guy named Mike and Katie. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but literally, like, just look at this compared to the world we're in, okay? This is the start. She says, "Honey, is that the doorbell? Who would be here at this hour? They're gonna be arrested," Katie said while neurotically flipping through different news feeds looking for some new information about the war. Michael unglued himself from his nervous encrypted hacking at the counter to look down the stairs at their Crystal townhome, looking for some clue. So this is an actual apartment complex in Atlanta that I picked out. Looking for some clue as to who should be at the door. The courier gave a brief hand gesture before slapping an envelope on the glass, dropping a note before scurrying back into his vehicle labeled Amazon Prime without so much as looking back. The hand symbol that he made through the narrow window beside the door, holding it just until he began to descend the stairs, was the unmistakable OK sign pointed downwards, prompting Michael to pick up the pace. Driving off into the dust faster than traffic surveillance would permit, almost as if he had no care as to whether he would be pulled over, he sped down the uncharacteristically empty MLK Junior Drive before turning left and disappearing. Now, literally, I wrote this. Let's see if I got a date on this thing. Is there a way you can see the date on a document?
They go to the original file, hover over it. Probably might be able to see it.
You can go to the files and go to the
file manager.
Well,
File
I know
manager
I opened it up this summer because I was trying to see how much of this is real, and I worked on it, and this says 620 on it. But usually you can tell when the original.
You got to go to the properties, and then it'll tell you when the file was created. Like, go to the file, right click, and then go to properties.
This says September 27, 2020. I know I did this before this because I literally wrote this, I want to say like 2 years ago. Because all these other documents from Millennium Underground, see, they all got 2020 dates on them. But I started doing all this stuff in 2013 because I have like a whole workbook.
It's date modified, right?
I know that seems like that's
created.
Yeah, if you ever like copied it or saved as, it'll save it as a new file. So
see, it's got them all as 2020. I wonder if maybe that's when I put it on the cloud.
Yeah, if you ever copied it created a new file.
Okay, so maybe I won't have that record. But anyways, it was definitely before the pandemic. But anyways, it says so he's watching the guy driving off, and he goes, like a rat on a sinking ship. David thought as he picked up the envelope, and the envelope labeled Protocol 6 open immediately. And again, that's named after 6 Seal. And it sent a shiver up his spine as he nervously tore open the perforated seal and unfolded the note. And it contained a single line with the passphrase, I-20 Hyperloop access authorized. Eruptus Michael, Eruptus Katie. So their name is Peters, but they all get their names changed to something when they go underground. And it says Michael's pulse quickened as he took in the gravity of the message. Katie, we need to go in a hurried tone. So essentially, he's getting the message that you need to go underground now because the nukes are about to drop and the earth's about to shake and all this stuff. I'm not going to get to all this because it's a lot of back and forth between them as he's kind of exposing what's going on. But basically, they're all in emergency and they're in a lockdown because World War III is going on. And then it talks about how they met and how they went into this. They got into some dancing thing that ended up being in a Masonic hall, because we have that here in Grand Rapids, and how he met a Freemason and he got caught up in this because they were like top scientists in robotics programs at like Georgia Tech. And then after that, he starts talking about the company they're working for and basically everything that was going on. And he starts telling her that the guy he met there was a Freemason, and that they're on their way to an underground civilization to escape the end of the world. And then she starts asking him, and he starts explaining what it is. And then he started talking about the whole separation of church amendment in the Constitution that came about that illegalized Christianity, essentially. And then he started talking about how all this was pre-planned, and then about how he knew these nukes were going to hit, because the nukes were actually cover up for them escaping underground. And then he calls he basically said that there's aliens coming because the sun turns to darkness, and that's what they believe. And then there was something else that talked about like the pandemics and the Christians starting to get persecuted because she's getting mad at it because her parents are Christians, and they never stopped to get any of their families, so she's mad. So this is kind of like, the prologue to the whole story, because the idea is this girl's not a Christian, but she came from a Christian family, and she's pissed off because they didn't warn her parents because they were Christians. And then she teaches her daughters like this like secret sign language type thing, essentially telling them never to trust the system and never to trust men. And that's what she's basically raising the daughters with for like 1,000 years. And then the final daughter gets up and she goes, she's one of the people meant to go up and corrupt the above ground, and she ends up getting converted. But anyways, I'm trying to see where it says this. I swear I had a pandemic in here. Maybe I just had it in some notes. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I just had it in some notes. But that was essentially the story, is that these nukes were going to hit, but there had already been war going on, and there had already been, Christians disappearing into camps by the time they go underground.
Yeah.
And the idea is there's so much chaos going on, and there's so much martial law going on, that nobody really can tell that these people are going underground. And then by the time they actually go underground, they basically take this thing around the off the highway, and then they go nukes just fall on the Atlanta area after they get to their highway. So that's the story. And I'm writing this stuff down, and I'm just like, okay, you have Christians disappearing in the camps, and you have, but it starts out first with the pandemic, then the war, then Christians disappearing in the camp. And the combination of all those things, they did on purpose, all to cover up their escape underground, because they knew Jesus was coming, but they just believed Jesus is an alien. So they actually believe the Bible, but they interpret it as Jesus isn't God, he's an alien. And so when they look at this, is like, this is these aliens' way to control our planet and manipulate it, because they're really here to get all our core resources, kind of like Independence Day and stuff like that. And that's how they build these cities. And they have a whole bunch of these things. And that's how they have transcended planetary life. And they sail through the starways and whatnot. And then the whole idea is that it's turning everything in the Bible to say, yes, it's true, but you need to look at it through this lens, if you will, of, basically Gnosticism, right? To not believe it's actually a good God, right? And so I started that. And then in order to get that story straight, that's how I started really getting deep into all this prophecy to nail this down. And that's how my Revelation book was written. So we'll see how that turns out. I don't know if I'm ever going to get it written because the stuff happens faster than I can write it down. So they'll be like, that ain't even original. He's just peeling off the news headlines. But yeah, so that's going to take us right to Ezekiel 38 and 39. And what we'll do is we'll do those two next week. Because it's just 2 chapters, but there's gonna be a lot of meat, and it's gonna be a lot of stuff that's gonna reverberate what we've been saying, and then we'll read the end of we'll probably refresh on Joel 2 a little bit, and then read the end of Revelation 6, and that's gonna actually take us into Daniel's 70th week. So we got 1 more week here, and then we're gonna have the 144,000 being sealed next 2 weeks from now.
So should we read 38 and 39 and refresh on Joel 2 so we can just,
Yeah,
you know?
I would say read 38, 39, Joel 2, and then Revelation 6.
All right.
You should be pretty well up to date because all that's going to mesh together. Because again, all the stuff we're reading, it all kind of overlaps, but that's kind of a stopping point. That's going to transition us into Daniel's 70th week. And that's why a lot of these Old Testament prophecies are going to leave it out. You don't get Daniel's 70th week except in Daniel. You get stuff that happens in Daniel's 70th week, but you don't have like this, you know what I mean, this period of time designated. And that's why, again, and anybody who's getting into Judaism in the Old Testament, that's part of the reason why I'm writing my book, The Apostles' Teaching, because I have this funny feeling that they might try to ban just the New Testament and keep the Old Testament because Judaism is going to get popular. And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to write this book called The Apostles' Teaching instead of the New Testament. And maybe it will stay off the radars. We'll see. Maybe low key enough. So that's it. Anyone else got any questions or thoughts before we wrap it up? Prayer requests, anything like that?
Wow. I'm doing pretty good over here. Thanks, though.
Me too. I had a trial